All right, Alex, you want to get us started on your end?
Sure will.
Light crowd today.
They heard I was going to be secretary or sergeant, whatever.
You're live.
All right. Welcome to the March 12th meeting of the Rotary Club of Beaver Creek. I am your host and president, Mike Canada. I'm glad all of you could be here today. I'd like to thank our greeters, Mike Zwick for our great speakers and programs, Jim Gundel and Alex Zahariev for website and YouTube, and Beth Cusack for our book dedication. I'd like to welcome all of our members who joined us today, any guests that may be joining, and as always, a special welcome to our speaker, Lindsay Kerr, who is on with us. She'll be talking to us today about the story of Lifeline Pilots. So Lindsay, thanks so much for taking time to spend with our club. So far, our club's been averaging 37 on Zoom and 13 on YouTube. We have a bit of a treat for our Sergeant at Arms report, as I will turn it over to Lieutenant at Arms Brandon Huff.
Okay. Well, we'll start out with birthdays, Rotary birthdays, and wedding anniversaries, and there are none in all three of those categories, which is exciting news because it means no one is getting older. So congrats for hitting pause on Father Time there. I did want to take a moment on a more serious note today, and because I noticed yesterday was March 11th, which was 1 year since it was COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic, and I think a lot of us remember the week very well. Last year, I know it impacted my business immediately as I had something to do with the big hoopla, and a lot of us were impacted in numerous ways this past year. So I just took a few notes. Within approximately 3 days, all major sports leagues shut down, and I think the number 3 ranked Flyers will forever remain one of the great what-ifs in college basketball here in the Dayton community. World travel grinded to a halt as borders closed and people scrambled to try to find ways home, and we all canceled plans. I know many of us still have a lot of dollars tied up in airlines. And then these were the staggering and just sombering numbers I read yesterday. 29.1 million Americans have been infected with COVID-19. 530,000 Americans have passed away from COVID-19. 985,000 Ohioans have been infected. 51,000 plus Ohioans have been hospitalized for COVID-19. 17.6 thousand Ohioans have passed away from COVID-19. 1 in 3 Americans know someone who has died from COVID-19. And 30% of those infected with the virus report symptoms 9 months after infection. So I know a year later, it's very easy to be numb to it, and we've seen how it's been politicized and polarized, and it still is to this day. But just step back and look at that bigger picture. It's very sombering. So just keep that in your mind over the next few days. So with that, I'm going to jump into the news. We'll start out with Biden signs $1.9 trillion stimulus bill into law on the U.S. lockdown anniversary. President Joe Biden signed his $1.9 trillion stimulus bill into law on Thursday, commemorating the 1-year anniversary of the U.S. lockdown over the coronavirus pandemic, with a measure designed to bring relief to Americans and boost the economy. The Democratic-led U.S. House gave final approval of the measure on Wednesday, handing the Democratic president a major victory in the early months of his term. Quote, "The historic legislation is about rebuilding the backbone of this country," Biden said before signing. Biden signed the measure before a primetime speech he planned for last evening. Let's see. Biden's signing of the legislation, called the American Rescue Plan, had initially been scheduled for Friday, but the White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain said it was moved up after it arrived at the White House on Wednesday evening. The package provides $400 billion for $1,400 direct payments to most Americans, $350 billion in aid to state and local governments, and an expansion of the child tax credit and increased funding for COVID-19 vaccine distribution. In more national news, the Senate confirms Biden nominee Garland as U.S. Attorney General. The U.S. Senate Wednesday voted overwhelmingly to confirm Merrick Garland, President Joe Biden's nominee for Attorney General, as the federal appellate judge won the support even of the chamber's top Republican, Mitch McConnell, who played a key role in denying him a spot on the Supreme Court in 2016. The bipartisan tally in the Democratic-led Senate was 70-30 to confirm Garland as the top U.S. law enforcement official, with 20 of the chamber's 50 Republicans, including McConnell and former Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham and Chuck Grassley, joining Biden's fellow Democrats in support. Garland, 68, will assume the post at a heightened concern about domestic extremism. He takes over a Justice Department that the Republican former President Donald Trump repeatedly sought to bend to his will. The former federal prosecutor also inherits sensitive ongoing investigation, including one involving Biden's son, Hunter Biden. I'm voting to confirm Judge Garland because of his long reputation as a straight shooter and legal expert, McConnell said before the vote. His left of center perspective has been within the legal mainstream. In New York, the mayor joins calls for Cuomo to resign over sexual misconduct claims. New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said Andrew Cuomo just can't serve as governor anymore, adding his voice on Thursday to a growing chorus of calls for Cuomo to resign after 6 women have now accused him of sexual misconduct. Cuomo, 63, has denied the allegations by the women, most of whom are former aides. The most recent is an unnamed aide who told the Times Union newspaper on Tuesday that Cuomo had groped her after calling her to the executive mansion last year under the pretext of business. Reuters could neither independently verify the woman's identity nor her account. Cuomo denied the accusation. The Times Union reported on Wednesday saying, quote, "I have never done anything like this," and called the details gut-wrenching. Reps for Cuomo did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The governor issued a broad apology at a news conference last week for his behaviors, but he has reaffirmed that he has never touched anyone inappropriately. And the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, is leading an independent investigation into the allegations. Cuomo has said he will not resign and has asked the public to await the results of the probe before making a judgment. In Ohio news, coronavirus in Ohio Thursday update. The numbers inch closer to the level where health orders will be lifted. Governor Mike DeWine provided several updates Thursday on COVID-19 and vaccination efforts in Ohio. He says, DeWine has said he will lift all state health orders related to the pandemic once the state achieves a rate of 50 cases per 100,000 residents over a 2-week period, and has said that it is currently at 155 per 100,000, down from a peak of 845 per 100,000 in December. With case numbers declining, DeWine said that county fairs can proceed this year. Social distancing and mask wearing will be required as long as the health orders remain in place. And he said for high school spring sports that student athletes will no longer be required to quarantine if there is incidental exposure to a positive case in the classroom. DeWine said the visitation policy at state nursing homes will follow new federal guidelines that have relaxed rules for visitation. And on the updated map for the public health advisory system, Franklin County and its surrounding counties remained at level 3 or red. A total of 21 counties were at level 2 or orange. In one county, I might be saying this wrong, Meigs, was at level 1 or yellow. The remaining counties were at level 3. Vaccinations are now available to those 50 or older, those in certain occupations, and those with certain medical conditions to include ALS, bone marrow transplants, people with type 1 and 2 diabetes, pregnant women, end of stage renal disease, those employed in childcare services, those employed in the funeral service industry, and law enforcement and corrections officers. And I'm excited about this local news story. He's on the call too. Beaver Creek Wetlands Association to acquire land for new trail system. Beaver Creek Township and the Beaver Creek Wetlands Association will buy land to create a new trail system that, when complete, will cost more than $7 million. For those who haven't been tracking, this is called the Spotted Turtle Trail. It's going to span 15 miles north to south, beginning at the new Pearls Fin, which is out in the Fairborn Township area off of Byron, and connect all the way down to Rotary Park in Beaver Creek with about 40 to 50 miles of trails within that corridor. Quote, "Our goal is to connect the whole corridor," Moran said, who is the vice president of the Beaver Creek Wetlands. People don't even know some of this land is here and they're not able to get in and enjoy it. Beaver Creek Township will buy wetland from Mark McIntyre for about $60,000. The land is off of Fairground and Beaver Valley Roads along the Beaver Creek, which is just across from Siebenthaler Fen. The township also plans to repair a bridge on the property for about $500. This is the only land that was privately owned in the proposed new trail system. Greene County commissioners, I don't know if Tom Kugler's on today or one of our other local commissioners, released funds to the township for the project last week. The money will go toward not only the land acquisition, but also a new observation tower at Hunter's Point, a new interpretive sign, and new signage for area neighborhood access. The total cost of this phase of the project is expected to be more than $67,000. Beaver Creek Township has also pledged in-kind staff hours and equipment use for this project. Moran said partnerships with Beaver Creek Township, Beaver Creek, Fairborn, and the county have allowed this project to come together, and they expect the total project to be about $7.5 million. So personal kudos to Alex Zahara, Pete Landrum, our commissioners, anybody who's had a hand in this. I have been tracking this for a few years, and I'm extremely excited for the day when that 15-mile trail comes. I'm going to have my wife drop me off at Pearl's Fin, and I'm going to run the whole thing. So kudos. And your name wasn't mentioned, or otherwise I would fine you $5. Okay, and in sports news, NHL is back on ESPN with a 7-year multi-platform deal. National Hockey League games will return to ESPN starting with the 21-22 season. ESPN and the NHL announced a 7-year deal on Wednesday, returning hockey to ESPN for the first time since 2004. Included will be 25 regular season games on ESPN or ABC, early round playoff series and 1 conference final each year, 4 Stanley Cup final series on ABC, and more than 1,000 games per season streaming on ESPN+. ESPN Plus and Hulu will be home to 75 ESPN-produced exclusive telecasts per season. The deal also includes opening night games, the NHL All-Star Game, Skills Challenge, and other special events. And the NHL's out-of-market streaming package, NHL.tv, is also moving to ESPN Plus as part of its subscription offerings. And in strange news, lion has vasectomy after siring 5 cubs in a year. In the Netherlands, a lion had a vasectomy on Thursday after his Dutch keepers decided he had sired enough cubs. Thor, 11, had fathered 5 cubs with 2 lionesses in the past year at the Burger Zoo. Veterinarian Hank Luton said it was the first time in his 35-year career at the zoo that he had to carry out the procedure on a lion. Why are we doing it? Because he's a proven breeder. We have a lot of offspring. We don't want him to overpopulate the genetic pool. Staff said they had chosen to carry out a vasectomy and not castration, which would have caused Thor to lose his mane along with his standing in the pride's social hierarchy. 5 staff had to lift the sedated lion onto the operating table in the zoo's clinic. And now for jokes. This is what we live for, folks. Bear with me. I saw an ad for burial plots, but that's the last thing I need. Did you hear about the silkworm race? It ended in a tie. I got fired from the calendar factory just for taking a day off. I wanted to learn how to drive stick shift, but I couldn't find a manual. What are windmills' favorite genre of music? They're big metal fans. The past, present, and future walk into a bar. It was tense. You know what they say about shopping centers? If you've seen one, you've seen them all. My ceiling isn't the best, but it's up there. I love whiteboards. They're remarkable. Which country's capital has the fastest growing population? Ireland. Every day, it's Dublin. The machine at the coin factory just suddenly stopped working. It doesn't make any sense. Yesterday, a clown held the door open for me. It was such a nice gesture. Becoming a vegetarian is a big mistake. What's the best time on a clock? 6:30, hands down. Please don't make my funeral too early. I'm not really a morning person. And fines. If you intend to go to a county fair this year, that's $1. If you never visited one of the Beaver Creek Wetlands before today's briefing, that's $1. If you've never watched a Columbus Blue Jackets NHL game, that's $1. If you have ever had a vasectomy, that's $1. And lastly, if you did not have a birthday, Rotary birthday, or wedding anniversary this week, that's $1. Love that one. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the president for the collection of Happy Bucks.
Thank you, Brandon. Randy was cracking up. You tickled his funny bone up there. Before we move on to Happy Bucks, special treat on Zoom, just something small that we can do together to kind of get to know one another. Last week, I announced that we would do a small segment called Show and Tell. Dave Cusack was voluntold that he would go first. And so I'm looking forward to him. Now, the fun thing is, Dave, once you're done, you can pick next week's show and tell presenter. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave, who will do a bit of show and tell.
All right, I will show and tell. Brandon, I noticed you've cleaned your act up a little bit grooming wise, but always looking to add time. I can recommend the aerodynamics of this hairstyle, so you may consider it just for thought. All right, so I will share with you a couple of things. First of all, even though my occupation is lawyer, I am super fortunate to have a lovely family, and we've been getting out and about during the pandemic. Near our house is Charleston Falls in Miami County, and there's Elizabeth, me, and our puppy dog. And then there's the rest of our group. Always try and tell my kids that you got to be a family person first. So be a father who engages in a profession, not a lawyer who has a family. So what you may not know about me is that before I finished college, I entered the Army National Guard, and believe it or not, I trained as a crane operator. I went to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and learned how to operate cranes. And then when I got back to my Kettering Armory post, I learned how to operate a bulldozer and a front end loader and a road grader and those kind of things. Anybody who has kids knows that you have your special thing with your kids, and our little girl, Emily, has brought me into the world of baking, believe it or not. And together we make projects. There is Emily with a rainbow unicorn cake that we made. There it is. And Beth lets us go do our thing, and the cakes are not very cost effective, but fun. Here is for Emily's 8th birthday. We created a frozen cake. And then a couple of other things. We made a first communion cake for her. And for Beth's birthday, we tried to recreate one of the To Kill a Mockingbird book covers, because she loves that. And then most recently, we did a St. Luke lion cake for friends of Emily's who were quarantined with the pandemic. So that's my show and tell. I'll have to think about it for a minute. If the president doesn't mind who we would name, I'll give it a little bit of thought for next week.
There you go, Dave. Thank you so much for sharing that that with us, that little piece of your life. That was awesome. So now let's move on to Happy Bucks.
Mike, I've got a whole bunch of happy bucks. Of course, Brandon mentioned most of them, so I appreciate that. So I'm only going to pay 50% then. First of all, I do have NHL tickets to see two of my favorite teams play on April 8th in Columbus. Columbus Blue Jackets against the Tampa Bay Lightning. So I will be attending an NHL game. Of course, limited capacity, but I was able to get tickets. I also want to give three happy bucks to, I got to make a presentation yesterday to two Beaver Creek Rotarians, Commissioner Dick Gould and Commissioner Rick Perales, and a Fairborn Rotarian, Tom Kugler. So they got to put up with me for at least a half an hour in a work session, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate their support, and also putting up with me for a half an hour of me rambling on. Did not know that we were on the agenda to go ahead and transfer the funds for the project of the Beaver Creek wetlands that Brandon said. So I showed up to the commissioners' meetings, and once again, thank you again for the county commissioners and their support. That is money generated from subdivision fees, and it goes to the county, and it's set aside for the jurisdictions to spend for parks. So I thank them for that. And Brandon mentioned it, the American Rescue Plan passed. And there's been discussion of how much money the local jurisdictions are going to get. I was informed this morning, a glitch in the federal law, they exempted all Ohio, and Illinois townships. Every other township in the United States will get money except for Ohio and Illinois. The feds are trying to fix that. So everybody's been talking about how much money they're going to get to help some of the shortfalls of revenue. And I heard today Beaver Creek Township is going to get 0. Thank you.
I have a happy buck with the aid of Carrie Souter. We got our federal 990 finished and filed. I do have a bit of unhappy buck in that I can't file with the Attorney General's office because I can't add Brandon on there as part of the board as the secretary. Every time I do, it errors.
That's just good screening.
I couldn't even add test person.
All right, thank you. Are there any other happy bucks?
Yeah, I got one. I think I mentioned, maybe I mentioned like a week or two ago. I don't know. I did get a promotion. A lot of y'all know the GS system. I'm not on the GS system. I earned my money since I'm NAF. I'm non-appropriated. So I'm not one of those terrible government bureaucrats, but did get promoted, and my pay band has a $50 range. It's kind of absurd. And my boss did give me a pay raise that I was very excited about because I was worried in due time that if a position opened up at another major race, like I wouldn't be able to say no. And he gave me a reason to be able to say no so that I can stay here for a long time. So it's a nice way of saying y'all are stuck with me. So I hope you like my antics.
Well, as president-elect, you are stuck with us, sir.
Congratulations, Brandon. Any other happy bucks? All right.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon. I will share. I am featured in the Diverse Issues in Higher Education magazine this month for Women's History Month on my promotion to provost, and Vice President Kamala Harris is on the cover of the magazine. So pretty excited to have been asked to be included in that edition of the magazine.
Wow, very good. Congratulations, Dr. Hunter.
Thank you.
Isn't there a fine involved with that?
It's got to be.
This is like $10 when you have like the VP on the magazine too.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that with us, Dr. Hunter. Any other happy bucks?
I'll put another one in. I'm kind of happy that I still have birds coming to my bird feeder, inspired by Brandon. It's putting me in the poorhouse, but I'm still waiting for the bluebirds to show up. Brandon had a pretty picture of bluebirds on his Facebook page, and I haven't seen any at my feeder. So I also learned that birds have a pecking order on who goes to the feeder, which is really interesting when you watch.
All right, we'll have to form a breakout room for the bird lover nerds in our club. Any other happy bucks?
Again, a continued happy bucks to the volunteers out helping with the vaccinations. All of our auxiliary and everybody that's helping out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, we'll move on to announcements. I will not be here next week. Hold your applause. I said hold your applause. So your president-elect will fill in for me, and with that, we will have no board meeting next week. Our next board meeting will be March the 26th when I get back. I just can't trust the president-elect to do a board meeting yet. We'll get there. We'll get there. If you're a guest and you haven't already, please fill in, if you would put your contact information in the chat so I can see. I think most of everybody here has given me their contact information. So with that, I'd like to make an announcement on getting back together as a club. As your elected president, I have enjoyed and taken the responsibilities of the president position pretty seriously, and I've enjoyed it. This year, my presidency will be forever remembered as the Zoom year, and the challenges that related to COVID-19 will continue to be played out in the coming year, if not longer. I acknowledge that members are anxious to get back together for in-person meetings, and it is in that spirit that the board has continued to discuss meeting in person in a manner that would be safe and responsible for everyone. Last month, our district governor asked us to refrain from meeting in person through the end of February. Then towards the end of February, we received an email from Rotary International providing the following guidance. As a humanitarian organization, we must act responsibly to protect our members and the communities we serve, and the risks of the pandemic are still real and widespread. The Rotary International Board advises regional leaders, district governors, club presidents, and others to hold meetings virtually through the end of the Rotary year, end quote. So the board met back on February 19th in accordance with Rotary International's guidance. The board unanimously approved the motion that the Beaver Creek Club will not hold any in-person meetings with the exception of Founders Day until the end of the Rotary year, June 30th, 2021. I know this news will be disappointing to many of you. However, the board felt we needed to adopt a clear and uniform policy, and therefore, out of an abundance of caution, suspend meetings through the rest of this Rotary year in accordance with and support for Rotary International. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I'm proud of your board that you elected in what has been a very challenging Rotary year. My hope is that in the next year, Rotary life can get back to some sort of normalcy. If any of you have any questions or wish to discuss that further, please give me a call or shoot me an email. And thank you for all you do for our wonderful club. And with that, I will introduce our speaker for today. I'm very excited. Lindsay Kerr is the Executive Director of Lifeline Pilots, a nonprofit based in Peoria, Illinois, but serving 10 states in the Midwest, including Ohio. Since 1981, Lifeline Pilots has facilitated free air transportation to passengers with medical or humanitarian needs. Through volunteer pilots, Lifeline Pilots enables all patients to receive the most cutting-edge treatments from faraway hospitals. Lindsay believes that everyone, regardless of income, should have equal access to healthcare. By removing the transportation barrier, Lifeline Pilots helps to ease the financial burden put on families during times of medical uncertainty. Lindsay has dedicated her professional life to the nonprofit sector. A year and a half ago, she brought her fundraising and communication skills to Lifeline Pilots and is helping the organization to expand its outreach throughout their 10-state region. Only 5% of those in need of free flights for medical care from far from home use their service because they don't know they exist. Learning about Lifeline Pilots and telling others could make a life-saving difference. Lindsay will share with us who Lifeline Pilots is, the impact it has on passengers and volunteers, and what you can do to help tell others about their amazing service. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Lindsay Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for having me today. Here we go. Looks like I can share my screen. Having Rotary meetings by Zoom has really opened our region up for groups like Lifeline Pilots. Because we cover 10 states, you know, if it weren't for meeting by Zoom, I wouldn't be able to speak to you today. And I've been speaking to a lot of Rotary clubs throughout our region. And it's just been really amazing, the response that I've had. And I love these times of the day when I get to speak to groups. So I just really appreciate you having me. So like Mike said, we are a nonprofit and our mission is to facilitate free air transportation. And we do that through volunteer pilots for people with medical or humanitarian needs far from home. So today, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how we fly people for medical care and what you can do to help, because that's really the big takeaway today, is how you can help us to spread the word about Lifeline Pilots. So we are celebrating 40 years this year. We're actually doing it this month during Women's History Month, because we were founded in 1981 by the woman in the picture there with me. Her name's Wanda Whitsitt, and she started Lifeline Pilots. She was a pioneer in the volunteer pilot sector. She knew that there were some other groups that were starting to do this, but they just didn't really formalize their operation. And she took it to the next level. And Lifeline Pilots is actually the oldest continuously running volunteer pilot organization in the United States. And in 1980s, Wanda and her husband were looking for something to do with their free time, and they decided to get their pilot's license. And then Wanda wanted to find a way to give back. She wanted to use her skill for good. And then she encouraged her friends and all the pilots that she knew to use their skill for good too. So since 1981, we have flown more than 8,900 flights and gone more than 5.2 million nautical miles. And we've done all of that with a 100% safety record, which we're very proud of. We're based in Peoria, Illinois, but you can see on the map that we cover 10 states, including Ohio. So it's easy for passengers to fly with us. We have an easy to complete online application, and we also have experienced mission coordinators who help make that journey as easy as possible. When a passenger completes the online form, we then obtain a medical release from their doctor, allowing them to fly. And that also just certifies that medical need. So to fly with us, a passenger has to have a financial or a compelling need. They have to be able to sit upright, be ambulatory, so they have to be able to get in and out of a small aircraft. Most of our pilots are flying small 4 to 6 seater single engine planes. So passengers do need to be able to get in and out of the plane. They can have some assistance from their caregiver or from the pilot, but they have to be able to, there's no ramps or anything like that to get into the planes. The great thing is that they can travel from the airport that's closest to their home, and that makes the trip as easy as possible. So they're not having to fly in and out of those big metropolitan airports. Instead, they're going out of, the small fixed space operators. They're not having to go through big security lines or encounter, hundreds or thousands of people in an airport. Instead, they might walk straight through that small airport and not encounter a single person except for their pilot. Every passenger can bring a caregiver or a companion with them. Adults can bring 1 support person and kids can bring 2. Now, the reason we limit the number of people is because of the space in the plane or the weight, because small aircraft are very limited by weight. So the more weight inside the cabin, the less fuel they can carry, which means the shorter distance that they can go. Sometimes the passenger contacts us directly, and sometimes they're referred by a medical professional. So that might be a social worker, a nurse navigator, a case manager. Those are people who know about what Lifeline Pilots does, and they can tell the passenger about our service. And there's no limit to the number of times someone can fly with us. So we're the facilitator between the passenger in need and the pilot who wants to fly them. Our volunteer pilots are general aviation pilots who own their own plane, or maybe they have access to a plane. Some of them even rent a plane in order to fly for us. Just last week, we had a flight go through Peoria, so we got to meet a couple of our pilots and our passengers, which we don't often do because usually the flights don't go through here. And when the pilot came through, he flies for UPS. And so he flies normally, huge planes, but he had a day off and he saw that we had a need. So he rented a plane in order to fly our passenger, which is very kind of him. Our pilots are, didn't mean to go to that. Our pilots are looking for a reason to fly. And what better reason than giving back to people in their time of need? So to fill a flight, we use our database of about 250 volunteer pilots, and they're located throughout our 10-state region. So today, using our database and the internet is a whole lot easier than it was back in 1981. When Wanda first started, she would pick up the phone and call. And I was talking to a volunteer pilot the other day who flew back in the 80s with Wanda. And he was saying that he remembers getting those phone calls from her and just how many hours and hours of work she would put in on the phone in order to fill one flight. So now, instead of calling, we have a database and we have an automated email that goes out twice a week to our pilots, and it just lists all the potential flights. And all they have to do is click on it, and it sends a message to our mission coordinator, and then our mission coordinator goes to work to set that flight in motion. And it makes it a whole lot easier. We have 2 mission coordinators, and they work closely with our passengers and our pilots to coordinate the flight. Depending on the distance, it might actually require more than 1 flight leg. So if you're flying a small single engine plane, a lot of times they can only go about 300 nautical miles at a time before they have to refuel. So if somebody's needing to go 800-900 miles, it's going to require 2 or 3 flight legs in order to get them there, which means our mission coordinators are making those connections between all of those pilots and where they're going to be meeting and the times. And there's a lot of coordination that goes into it. Kind of works like a relay race. So our first pilot picks up the passenger, they fly and meet pilot number 2, they pass the baton off, they pass off the passenger, who then flies, meets pilot number 3, and pilot number 3 would take them the rest of the way. We do have some requirements to be a pilot. You have to be 21 years old. You have to have 250 hours as pilot in command of an aircraft. You have to pass a medical exam. And a pilot, a little over a year ago, he told me one thing you have to do is like hugs. And I think it's the one thing that we're really missing at the moment, especially for our volunteer pilots, because our passengers are so incredibly grateful that they've been given this free flight to get them where they need to go. They are often at such a place of desperation in their life where they're dealing with oftentimes ongoing medical concerns, huge bills. They're not sure how they're going to get to where they need to go. And then an organization like Lifeline Pilots comes into their life and they realize that there is not a single cost involved. And all they want to do is give that pilot a hug and say thank you at the end of the flight. And we're definitely missing that. And I cannot wait until the day when COVID is behind us and our passengers can give our pilots a hug again. So while our region covers 10 states in the Midwest, we're not limited to flying with just within those 10 states. We're able to help passengers outside of them by partnering with other volunteer pilot organizations. While Lifeline Pilots is the longest serving in the United States, there are lots of other volunteer pilot organizations around the country. And we work together to help people in need. So if somebody needs to get from Ohio to, let's say, Texas, we can partner with another volunteer pilot organization to get them there. We want to make sure that every passenger gets every effort on our part to serve them and to meet that need that they have. Excuse me, just have a drink real quick. All right. So you'll see in a lot of our images that people are wearing masks. We take the pandemic very seriously and we don't want to be part of spreading the virus. So to keep from doing that, we ask that everyone who flies with us wears a mask at all times. Our pilots wipe down the planes before and after people are in there. And we also follow the CDC guidelines and we go through a checklist with all of our passengers and our pilots before they fly with us. So even though the pandemic has presented a lot of obstacles for Lifeline pilots, we've seen a significant increase in the need for our service. From June to December 2020, we had a 48% increase in flights flown over the same time the previous year. And that was huge for us. And that was just because we had people who needed, who were scared to fly commercially, who needed that transportation, people with compromised immune systems. It was already scary for them to fly. And then when COVID hit, it just made it even worse. So like Mike said in the introduction, we believe that everyone, regardless of location or income, should have equal access to healthcare. But unfortunately, not all healthcare is close to home. People who are on a fixed income or people who live in rural areas might not have the same access that people do who live in metropolitan areas or who have more money. You can see in the picture here, the woman in the middle, her name's Jill, and her husband's on the right, and on the left is their pilot, Andy. And this was in October 2019, so this is pre-pandemic, which is why they're not wearing a mask. And Jill has severe life-limiting scoliosis, and they actually live near Peoria. And she was just devastated when her local doctor told her there was no more treatment to help her. But she was told about a specialist at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And the problem was they're on an extremely limited income and they couldn't travel to Mayo. They couldn't afford to drive. They didn't have a reliable car. They couldn't afford to fly. So they applied to Lifeline Pilots, and I was actually privileged enough to be able to go on this flight with them because they were traveling from Peoria to Rochester. And as we were flying, I looked back and I could see that Jill looked just absolutely terrified. But it was a beautiful day and the plane ride was incredibly smooth. You can see the blue clouds behind us, the blue sky behind us. And when we landed in Rochester and we were saying goodbye to them, Jill looked at us and she just started to cry. And she said, I am so scared to be here and I'm scared what the doctors are going to tell me, but I know this is where I need to be. And I just can't believe you got me here. And she gave Andy and I huge hugs. And I had just started in my position with Lifeline Pilots. I'd only been working for the organization about a month. And it was right then that I was like, this is why pilots do it. This is why they come back again and again. You know, some pilots fly multiple times a month. And it's because they know that they can use the skill that they have and that they're fortunate enough in life to be able to afford to help people in this immensely impactful way. So every flight really is free. We don't go through insurance. There's no copay. There's no deductible. There's no hidden cost. You know, they never accidentally get a bill from us later. It is just free. There's actually rules and regulations by the FAA that says a pilot cannot accept compensation for this type of flight. And it's important that it's free for every time they fly, which is why we don't have a limit on the number of times someone can fly with us. Talon, who's in these pictures here, he's 4 years old now. And Talon's a frequent flyer with us. He was born in July 2016 prematurely, and he has now flown with us more than 18 times in his short life. He has multiple severe congenital heart defects, and he's required a number of surgeries and procedures over the years. His parents, they live on a single income. His mom can't work. You know, she has a very sick child at home who she needs to be able to take care of. And she can't drive all the way by herself from their home in Kentucky to Boston Children's Hospital where he receives care. So instead, they use Lifeline Pilots, and they've actually told a lot of other families who have children with congenital heart defects about us, and we've been able to fly those kids too. Boston Children's Hospital has just an amazing team of doctors who can help kids and give them a normal life. And we feel very privileged that we can be part of their journey and we can get them there. We have a couple pilots who often argue over who's going to fly Talon when we post a flight. You can see the beautiful aircraft behind him. It's a pressurized plane, so it can get him there pretty quickly. And it's really amazing how our pilots just immediately step up, and the pilots kind of start to become family for people like this who are frequent flyers with us. So if every flight is free, how are we funded? We receive no government funding. Instead, we rely on donations from individuals, businesses, and foundations to fund the facilitation of every flight. Our pilots are by far our biggest supporter. They give hundreds of thousands of dollars every year in donated flight time, fuel, and airplane costs. And we take our responsibility as the stewards of our donors' dollars very seriously. We are very fiscally responsible. I'm often told that I'm very frugal with our money, but you know, we want to make sure that we're using that money to fund our missions and that we're keeping our costs as low as possible. The problem that creates is that we just don't have the funds to tell everybody in our 10-state region about us. Because really, to help more people, we have to tell more people. And we don't have a big marketing budget. We're an extremely small team. We have 2 full-time staff and 2 part-time, and that's it. But we cover a region of 500,000 square miles with a population of 70 million people. To really reach all of those people, I need a multi-million-dollar marketing budget, and I'm operating probably on less than $10,000 a year for outreach. So that's why I'm here to talk to you. You know, I'm just asking for each of you to take the opportunity to help people by sharing the mission of Lifeline Pilots. Like Mike said in the introduction, you know, a study was done that said only 5% of those with a need for our service are using it. And it's just because they don't know about us. We're in need of exposure and awareness, because the more people who know, the more people we can help. So if you are a pilot or you know a pilot, please share our mission and volunteer for us. If you're located anywhere in the Midwest, they can fly for us. And honestly, if you know a pilot located anywhere in the United States, tell them about volunteer pilot organizations, because they could volunteer for any of the VPOs throughout the country. We're always in need of additional pilots, and it's a really great way to get airtime while giving hope to people in need. It's also tax deductible. So at the end of the year, we send our pilots a tax deduction sheet similar to what you'd get if you give a donation. Oops, I missed one there. And finally, passenger outreach is extremely important. We need help spreading information about Lifeline Pilots, and you can do that. The easiest way is through social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and you can help to share our story. You can like our pages, you can comment and share our posts with your friends and family, because honestly, you never know who in your network might be in need of our service. We try to change our content up a little bit. So on Instagram, you can see the image there with the moose. Miles the moose is our mascot, and he gets sent to all the kids who fly for us and to any donors who donate over $250 to our organization. And Miles has taken over our Instagram account, so everything is shown from his perspective. We have some fun videos and posts, and we're going to be running some contests coming up where people can win a Miles the Moose. So we try to keep it light and fun and just really engaging with people who join us on social media. You know, every share counts, and we just ask that you help to spread the word in that way. We also, you know, if you're really inspired by what you've heard today, we're always in need of outreach volunteers. You can do it from the comfort of your own home and your own community. We need people to help share with the fixed-based operator airports, you know, the different flight clubs that might be in your region. We also need volunteers to help us make connections with medical or hospital systems in your region. Like I said, we only have 4 staff members, and 2 are full-time and 2 are part-time. So it makes it almost impossible for us to reach out to every medical center within our 10-state region and tell the social workers and the case managers about us. But if you wanted to donate some time and volunteer and help us make those connections in your community, we would welcome the help. So you can find more information about us at lifelinepilots.org. And later today, I can send an email to your club as well that could be shared. And so that could, it just has additional information about us and how to make connections with us and ways that you can help. You can also see all of our different handles there for social media, but honestly, you go on any of them and just type in Lifeline Pilots and you can find us. But our website has our pilot application, our passenger application, and lots of other information. So now, you know, if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to answer them. And I just thank you so much for letting me tell you about Lifeline Pilots.
Thank you, Lindsay. The people that are utilizing this service now, how did they originally hear about this sort of service?
Most people who use us heard about us through word of mouth. So somebody else who had flown with us or someone that they knew told them about us. We do limited social media advertising. You know, we boost the posts and those types of things. And we do get referrals from some medical centers. We fly, the 2 biggest places that we fly to are Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, and Cancer Treatment Centers of America in Zion, Illinois. And a lot of medical staff there tell the passengers about us.
So if someone wanted to volunteer and help get the word out, we could go to the website and figure out the resources that we could utilize from there to help spread the word.
You can, and I'll share an email with you that you can send to the club, and it has my contact details. So you can always reach out to me if you want additional information, but I'll send our brochure and just a one-sheet kind of information sheet. So if you have connections within, you know, a local medical or hospital system, you can feel free to share that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. How do you cover your self-liability?
We spend a lot of money on insurance. That is one of the biggest costs that we incur. Second, probably only to our salaries that we have to pay. So yeah, we have insurance policies, and then all of our pilots have to have insurance as well, and they have to give us their insurance documents so that we make sure that everybody who flies with us has a liability policy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Mike, you still got your helicopter pilot's license?
We don't tend to do too much with helicopters, but we will sometimes refer people if that's the service that they need. We don't do emergency flights. Our flights do require that people have an appointment that's set up that we can work towards. If somebody's already in our system and they've flown before and we've gotten that medical release, we might be able to set the flight up in 2 or 3 days, but otherwise it sometimes can take 2 or 3 days just to get that release from their doctor. So for new passengers, we do require usually about 5 to 7 days.
Does anybody else have any questions for Lindsay?
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. I love being able to talk with Rotary clubs. So I really appreciate the time that you've given me today.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Lindsay. It's part of our tradition to donate a book to the Beaver Creek Library in your honor. So I will turn it over to Beth Cusack for that.
Lindsay, thanks for being with us today. In your honor, we will donate a book to the Beaver Creek Children's Department. I don't know if you can see this. It's called Princess in Black, and it's the Science Fair Scare. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, that's awesome. My daughter has those books, so I know them well.
The popular series, little girl. Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone.
All right, thank you. So next week we will have Bethany Deans from Dayton Shriners Hospital talking with us about Shriners in Dayton, and she will be introduced by Carrie Tucker. As a reminder, please keep an eye on upcoming programs at beavercreekrotary.com and Facebook. Dave, I don't know if you've thought about who you would like to nominate for next week's show and tell.
I have. So we always hear about the great things going on at Clark State College, and we hear the professional accomplishments of Dr. Hunter. Maybe she can show and tell us something we don't know about her.
Dr. Hunter, would that be okay with you?
I am checking my calendar to make sure I'm going to be able to attend next week. Yeah, I can do that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Dave, again for kicking us off. And then Dr. Hunter, thank you for next week. Is there anything else for the good of the club? All right. With that, have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you back here next week.
Great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.